Hello and welcome to our first Facebook Live of 2021. Welcome to all of you who are watching this afternoon as this goes out live, and also welcome to those of you who are watching this on the replay. I'm David Miles, and I'm on a mission to help mortgage brokers and financial advisors to generate their own leads online so as they can stop giving money to lead generation companies. Now, one of the things I've had a few people ask me about recently is blogging and whether running a blog is still a worthwhile thing to do in this day and age, when there are obviously various other ways you can get content out there, like video, podcasts, etc. So I thought I'd talk about that. And also the other reason for choosing this topic at this particular time is because I'm very conscious that we're in January, people have made New Year's resolutions, and very often one of the New Year's resolutions that business owners make is, this is the year that I'm going to start a blog and be consistent about blogging. And I know that happens because quite often, if I'm asked to audit somebody's website, this happened to me only a couple of months ago. I was auditing someone's site. Hello, James, if you're watching. And there was a blog on there, and there was something like, there was one blog posted in August 2020. And then before that, there'd been about 4 in January 2020. And then prior to that, there'd been a big gap. There were lots in the beginning of 2019, and there was some at the beginning of 2018. And clearly, this was someone who had started the last 2 or 3 years thinking, I'm going to be blogging this year. And of course, by late January, early February, the excitement and the momentum had worn off, a bit like people joining the gym in January. Basically, it's the same kind of idea. So I thought this was a good time for that reason, and because of having people ask me about it, to look at the topic of blogging. So just before we get started, if you just so I can check that the tech is working, I've got an iPad down here so I can see people's comments and things. If you're watching at the moment, if you could just post a quick hello and maybe just say whether you currently run a blog, either one that's actually active or one that's gone dormant, or whether it's something that you're thinking of doing, that would be great. So we're going to be, hang on, let me just get that set so I can actually see the comments. Right, okay. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the benefits of blogging, and asking whether it's still relevant in a world where we have other options like YouTube, podcasts, etc. So let me just turn my screen share back on so as you can see the slides. Okay, good. Right, so let's start right at the beginning. What actually is a blog? Well, technically, the word blog is actually a contraction of the word web and log, a web log. So basically, a blog is a logbook, like a diary or whatever, if you like, that someone can keep on the web. So think of it basically as a section of your website where you can add new content on a regular basis very easily, just as easy as if you were typing a document in Word. And the website platforms like WordPress make it really, really easy for people to start and run a blog. So what kind of stuff goes in a blog? Well, it can be all sorts of things. It can be just sort of informational kind of posts. So, in the case of the kind of people who are watching this today, information about mortgages, how they work, or about financial products like pensions or investments or whatever. It can be a place where you can share news, industry news, like you might post something about a Bank of England base rate cut or something, or news of your own that may be of interest to other people. You can share opinions, so sort of that's kind of linked to the news thing, so you might write a post about what's going on in the news at the moment, but actually put your own spin on it and give your own opinions as to whether you think this is a good or a bad thing that you're talking about. And it's also a good place to share tips, about your particular area of expertise, whether that's financial advice or mortgages or protection or whatever. So tips that your potential clients and existing clients may find useful. So there's more things than that you can put in, but they're the kind of things that you typically find in there. And I'll talk a bit more later on about how you can come up with ideas for exactly what kind of content to put into your blogs. So why should people be blogging? Well, there are a number of reasons. I've picked really what I think are the top 4 reasons why it's a good idea, even now in 2021, when blogging might be seen as old school by some people. I think there are 4 really good reasons, at least, why people should be doing it. So the first is all about building up authority. So it's really important, particularly when you operate in a crowded marketplace like financial services, and where by and large, all financial advisors, all mortgage brokers are all offering the same products from the same insurance companies or the same lenders. It becomes really important to have some way of differentiating yourself, and building up authority and becoming seen as, as the go-to person, the expert on this, is one way to set yourself apart from your competitors. And think about it from the client's point of view. If they're trusting someone with their life savings, or they're trusting the future of their retirement to a particular advisor or something, are they going to want to go to someone who clearly has a really strong in-depth knowledge of the industry and of the sector? Or are they going to want to go to someone who probably does have just as much knowledge but isn't demonstrating that in any way? So if you can get your blog going well and use it to show that you are an authority on the subject and you're keeping up to date with industry developments, that's going to help engender more trust and credibility, and mean that people are more willing to do business with you rather than one of your competitors. Running a blog can be a big time saver as well. Now, you might think that's a bit weird. How can it save time? Because I've got to sit there and write articles and publish them and whatever. But if you blog about the right kinds of things, it can actually be a big time saver, because you can basically write a piece of information once in the form of a blog, but then you can use that information again and save yourself writing the same thing over and over again. So let me give you an example. In my business, I often find that I'm sending emails to prospective clients talking about the kind of ways I can help them. And as a lot of you know, one of the things that I help mortgage brokers do is to decide what kind of niche they're going to focus on within the mortgage industry. Now, a lot of the time, the prospective clients I'm talking to don't understand anything about niching. They've never heard of it before. And so if I'm sending them an email, I'd have to write quite a lengthy explanation as to what I mean by niching, why it's a good thing, how you do it. Well, the thing is, I've already got at least one blog article all about the benefits to mortgage brokers of finding a niche. If you've not read it yet, I recommend you do. So if I'm sending an email to a prospective client where I'm saying one of the things I'll help you with is finding a niche, I can just say that in the email and link to the article. So if they want more information on what niching is and why it's a good idea, they can click through there and read it. And if you're clever about the kind of things you blog about, what you'll start doing is blogging about the things that you often find yourself explaining to clients or potential clients. So if, for example, as a mortgage broker, you find that with virtually every potential client you speak to, you're having to explain to them how credit checking works, and how they get copies of their credit file from the different credit reference agencies. Rather than having to explain that countless times or put it in countless emails, you could write a blog about that particular thing. And okay, that might take you half an hour to write that blog, but it means that from then on, any time that you need to explain that concept to someone, you can just send them a link to that blog article. And of course, while they're there reading that, they may read other articles of yours, all of which will help them form hopefully a better impression of you, because they'll be reading about the other things you've talked about and getting that sense of how credible and how much authority you've got. So the other reason to it is content. So obviously one of the reasons, as I said, for having content on your site is it may save you time. Another reason is search engines like websites, which have plenty of content, and also content that is being regularly added to, changed, updated, etc. Because search engines like Google, will see that as a sign that your website is up to date and that it's a good source of information that they should return in their search results. And I'll show you a real world example of the impact of that in a moment. The other reason why that content is useful as well, this links into something that I was talking about on today's group coaching call with the members of the Predictable Pipeline program. We were talking about how you can build relationships with potential clients, and in particular, how you can use email marketing to build rapport with potential clients and prospects, so as they come to you when they're ready to get a mortgage or get financial advice or whatever it is. And of course, the more content you've got on your website in the form of your blog, the more useful things you've got available that you can share with people in the emails that you send to them. And those of you who are on my mailing list, which I suspect is most people watching this at the moment, you'll notice that a lot of emails I send are actually just a short email with a link through to a blog article where you can read more about that particular topic. So, so content is good both from your own point of view, but also from the point of view of the fact that the search engines will favor your site more if it has genuinely useful and regularly updated content. And then the fourth reason why I think you should be blogging, and why you should still be blogging today, even if there are other things available you could be doing instead or as well, is blogs give you a great way to get links to your website from other sites. So they're a really useful tool, or an essential tool really, when it comes to doing any kind of link building exercise. Now, for those who aren't familiar with what I mean by link building, it's an aspect, and a very important aspect, of search engine optimization. So in simple terms, when Google is deciding which websites to show in the search results for any, the organic search results I'm talking about here, not the paid ones, they look at, broadly speaking, two things. They look at how well optimized your website is, what kind of content's on it and how easily they can work out what that content's about. But Google also looks for signs that your website is an authority on that particular subject. And one of the ways it will determine that you are a credible, authoritative source is by looking at how many other websites link to your site. So what most people do is, rather than just sit back and wait for links to come naturally, because that may never happen or could take a very long while, if you're doing SEO yourself, or you're paying someone else to do it for you, a big part of it is all about approaching other website owners and asking if they will link to an article or some other kind of content on your own website. Now, obviously, it becomes much easier to get people to link to you if you have genuinely useful content available on your site. And the easiest way to have that genuinely useful content is to have it in the form of a blog. And then, you can go to other websites and say, I noticed you've got this article here about, first-time buyer mortgages. I've written an article about that, which I think has got some really useful information, which your readers would find helpful as well. Would you be interested in linking from your article to mine? That's just a simple example of the kind of thing we're talking about. But there's a lot more to link building than that. And if you want to know more about it, I suggest go to Google and search for shotgun skyscraper, 2 words, shotgun skyscraper, and the top result that comes up will be an article of mine describing the link building process and how that works. But fundamental to it is having content that people are going to want to link to. So I mentioned just search engines liking content. Just a stat to back that up. It's been shown that websites which have blogs, and therefore which have that kind of content, have 434% more pages indexed in search engines. And obviously, although those of you who've been following me for a while, you'll know I'm a big fan of paid search traffic in the form of things like Google Ads. But equally, the more organic traffic you can get, the better as well, because your organic traffic isn't costing you for each click. So it's even if you're doing things like Google Ads, it's a good idea to be doing things as well to supplement that with organic traffic. And having content in the form of a blog is a really good way to do that, as borne out by that statistic there. Now, I said I'd show you a real world example, and this real world example actually comes from my own website. So I've obviously had a website for my business right from day one, but initially I didn't get round to putting any kind of blog on it. And what that meant was that the level of traffic to the level of organic traffic to my site was quite low, but it was steady, but it was low. And initially that didn't worry me, because I was, like a lot of you guys probably are doing, I was relying purely on referrals and word of mouth recommendations in order to grow my business. And then it got to a point where I thought, well, actually, I need to be supplementing this. Can't rely on referrals forever, because as I'm sure you all know, trouble with referrals is it can be a bit feast and famine. Some weeks or months you'll get several referrals, and then you could go several weeks without anything at all. So it becomes very difficult to plan and to scale a business if you're relying totally on referrals and word of mouth. And of course, then you get times like, a global pandemic when no one's going out and seeing each other and socializing. Of course, that causes word of mouth referrals to drop as well. So, it's not a good idea to be reliant on that. But anyway, I took the decision that I wanted to start growing the organic traffic to my site. So the first thing I did was I actually started a blog, and I did that here at the beginning of 2019. And you can see, hopefully you can see, depending on what size screen you're on, that after a few months, just round about here, so what's that, about June, July kind of time, this graph here, which is the number of visitors to the site per month, this graph, just starts to slightly move up a little bit. It's just starting to see a slight uptick. And that is purely as a result of having started doing the blog. It was increasing the amount of content. Google was starting to take more interest in the site, and Google was also seeing that, every time it came back to the site, there was a new piece of content had been added. And they like that kind of thing. Then once I'd built up a sort of critical mass of content, the next thing I did at this second arrow was I started doing quite an intensive link building campaign. So I started doing that shotgun skyscraper outreach that I recommended you have a read up on the article about, asking people to link to different articles. And this is where you can see things really started to take off, and after doing 2 or 3 months of this link building, we start to see steady increases in the amount of organic traffic. I think you get occasional months where there's a dip, like particularly around, I think that's December there, so obviously there's less people around because of Christmas and whatever, but the general trend started to become noticeably upwards. And then the third arrow there, that's the start of the COVID pandemic and the first lockdown. And like a lot of business owners, in those initial few weeks when the world kind of stopped, I did the sensible thing and thought, right, there's nothing going on in the outside world. Now's the time to focus inwards and really, catch up on some of that marketing. So I had a big increase in the amount of content I was putting out, which again led to sort of further increases. That's January, so that's not a complete month, so that's why that's so low. But yeah, you can hopefully see from that the impact of A, blogging and having the content there, and then B, amplifying that content by getting people to link to it. But of course, you can't do any of that unless you've got a blog in the first place. So let's just talk quickly about some of those alternatives then. The alternatives to blog, if people say, well, why do I want to run a blog? I could just put stuff on social media and post stuff on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. Well, yeah, you can, and you certainly should be posting on those things. But there's two things to bear in mind with social media. Firstly, those are platforms which you do not own. Okay, so personally, I would rather, whilst I might use social media to spread the word about what I'm doing and to share my content more widely, ultimately, I want the place that people are coming to be my website, because I own that. I'm in control of it, and I'm not subject to whatever whims or changes Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever decide to bring in at any point. Also, if you are posting stuff on social media, then obviously you've got to have things to post. And if you have a blog of your own, that immediately gives you a whole source of content which you can share on social media. So without that, you would just be commenting on things or sharing other people's content. By having your own blog and your own reservoir of content, you've immediately got more things that you can be sharing on your social media platforms. YouTube. So the video is where things are moving to, particularly the younger generation favor video over written content. I get all that, not arguing with that at all. And YouTube, owned by Google, second biggest search engine, etc., etc. So yeah, you should be doing YouTube stuff as well. But a lot of the things that you put on YouTube could potentially start life as a blog. So for example, some of the things on my YouTube channel are things which originally I wrote as a blog article, and then I've turned them into a video. Even if it's just a video of me talking to camera, saying basically the same thing that's in the blog, it allows people to consume that content in a different way, and in a way which may be preferable to them if they prefer video to written word. But the point is that by having done the blog in the first place, I've then got the material, and I can very easily turn that into a video. Similarly with podcasts. Yeah, podcasts are great. I listen to loads of podcasts myself. I'm sure you do as well. But I think they're a lot more work to produce a podcast than it is to write an article, to write a blog article, because, you've got to have the recording equipment, you've got to edit it afterwards, all that kind of thing. But again, if you are going to be doing podcasts, if you've got blogs there already, that gives you a lot of source material for your podcast and a lot of stuff that you can talk about in your podcast, or just, at the simplest form, take something you've written and turn it into one or more podcast episodes. So I'm not saying that these alternatives don't have a place. What I'm saying is that blogging is still relevant, because blogging can actually help you do a better job with your social media, your YouTube, your podcasts, etc. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Right, so hopefully now I've convinced you that blogging is a good thing. Let's think about what kind of things should people actually be blogging about. So there's various things, but I think these are some of the easiest ones to get started. I think one of the first things you should do is try and blog about the common questions that people have about your industry, your products, your services, or whatever. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, it goes back to the thing I said earlier on about using your blog content as a time-saving thing and being able to point people towards an article you've written, in response to a question they may have. But also, it's good from a search engine optimization point of view. A lot of the things that people type into Google are questions. Can I get a mortgage if I've got 5% deposit, or can I get a mortgage if I've been furloughed, or there's all sorts of questions people ask about mortgages, about investments, about everything else. And so if you have blog entries, blog posts that answer those questions, then you have a good chance of ranking high up in the search results when someone types in one of those things. So think about the kind of questions that clients and potential clients ask you at the moment. Or if you're stuck for ideas, there are online tools that can help you. So there's an online tool called answerthepublic.com, where you can go to that and you can put in a keyword like pension advice, and it will tell you all the kinds of questions people ask about that. You could look on sites like Quora and see what kinds of questions people are posting there and what kind of answers people are giving. Or even, if you go to Google and just start typing in a particular keyword or topic, like if you go to Google and start typing in mortgages, or or first-time buyer mortgages, or shared ownership mortgages, in the list of suggestions, Google will show you suggestions, and those are based on things that people have actually been searching for. So then you could create content that answers those questions. Writing blog articles with tips and advice in is always a good thing. I think I mentioned that back at the start, but those simple sort of list-based blog posts, like 10 tips to improve your chances of getting a mortgage, those kinds of things. Similar idea, you can do blogs about mistakes to avoid. So 5 things you must avoid doing if you want to retire at 55, or 4 things you must avoid doing if you want to get the best mortgage rate, or whatever. And then and those, by having those kind of, it gives them kind of more attractive headlines as well, or more attractive titles very often. As we talked about earlier on, you can share industry news. As I said, try and, if you're doing that, give your own take on it as well, because again, that adds to the sort of thought leadership thing, rather than just regurgitating other people's news. You could say, the Financial Conduct Authority announced this today, and the impact of this on consumers is blah blah blah, and I think this is a good idea because XYZ, or I think it's a bad idea because XYZ, whatever. But try and make it your own. If you can do blogs around original research, that's really good, because obviously it means it's stuff that people won't have seen anywhere else. And it also is generally easier to get people to link to stuff that is original research as well. So, so for example, I'm at the moment working on a blog article that's going to be based on the results of a poll that's been running in this Facebook group, where people have been asked, what's the main way that you get your leads at the moment? And there's choices like, referrals, or buying leads, or Google, or Facebook. And I'm going to start analyzing some of that data and seeing if there's scope there to write an article about, the most common ways that mortgage brokers and IFAs get their leads. And if I create a blog out of that, there'll be statistics in there which are not going to be found anywhere else. So people are more likely to want to link to that, whether they're journalists or whatever. But it's a good way to get links into your site if you've got something on your site that people can link to that they won't find anywhere else. Obviously, it takes a little bit more work, but the more work you put in, the more you get out. And then stories, human beings love reading stories. So that could be stories about, things that have happened to you in your business, or it could be client case study type stories, anything that helps bring the subject alive. And storytelling is a really good way to do that. And then the final thing you need to think about, as once you've thought about, how are you going to, what are you going to blog about, is how are you going to be consistent? How are you going to keep this thing going? How are you going to avoid being that person who starts a blog in January and by middle of February it's withered and died? And this is actually easier than you might think. It's just a case of knowing what the techniques are. So I think one really important thing is to plan. So have a content calendar. If you've written down a plan, you're far more likely to keep to it. But if you just, do things randomly. So, take a calendar for the coming year or the coming quarter or whatever, and plan out what you're going to blog about each week, each month, each fortnight, whatever, frequency you've decided you're going to do. Have it planned out in advance. Not only does that help make sure that you're more likely to do it, but it also gives you a bit more structure and means you might decide to take a bigger topic and maybe break it down into 3 parts. So, in February, you might write 3 blogs, but they're part 1, 2, and 3 of an overall article. And by planning it out like that, it becomes easier to see where those opportunities exist to break things down, or, do a whole series of blogs on a particular theme and then move on to the next one. I also find, and I know from talking to other people, I'm not unusual in this, I find that ideas for blogs come to me at the exact moments when I'm not in a position to write a blog. So, I might get ideas for what a blog article is when I'm driving in the car or, or walking the dog or whatever. And but if I actually sit down to write a blog, that's the point at which my mind will go blank. So a really good way to deal with that is to have some kind of place that you can capture the ideas as they come to you. That could be a simple notebook, it could be a Google Doc, it could be a card on a Trello board, whatever your preferred kind of thing is. But have somewhere that whenever an idea for a blog post comes to you, just put that idea down in the idea bank. Don't even think about trying to write it at that point. But what that means is that then when you do come to actually write something, rather than spending the first half an hour sitting there thinking, oh, what shall I write about? All you've got to do is pick up your ideas bank and go, yeah, we'll write about that one today. And that, that removes one of the massive barriers to actually getting started on doing the writing. And I've said there about, when you come to do the writing, I think it's a really good idea to batch your writing. So set aside a particular time each week or each fortnight or once a month, whatever works for you, and say that is your blog writing time. So set aside, say, half a day and aim to write 3 or 4 blogs within that time period. It's far more effective, and any productivity expert will tell you this, it's far more effective to focus on one thing for a batch of time like that. And then, you don't publish all those blogs all at once, but you've then got them there, and you can drip feed them out over the coming weeks. So of course, if you've got your ideas bank, it becomes quite easy to pick up the ideas list, go, right, I'm going to write those 4 blogs this morning, shut yourself away for a couple of hours, write those, and then, that's then your reservoir of content for the next few weeks. Be consistent. So we've talked about the blogs that that start off well and then disappear. It's far better. Don't set yourself unrealistic goals. So what we don't want is you to start off and in the first week you're blogging every day, and then it drops to once a week, and then once a month, and then once a quarter. It's far better to say, right, I'm going to commit to publishing 1 blog, let's say, 1 a week or 1 a fortnight or 1 a month, whatever it is that's going to work for you, and then stick to that. And use scheduling of your posts to mean that, even if you do have 5 blog posts sat there ready to go, don't be tempted to publish them all on the same day or on the same week. Hold them back and drip them out. So if you've got that consistent schedule, because people will, over time, will come to know that, oh, okay, John publishes something once a week and it's normally on a Wednesday, and they'll get used to that. And they'll be, if you get really good at this, they'll actually be anticipating and looking forward to it. This is exactly the reason why, popular podcasts or, before that, TV shows come out at the same time on the same day every week, because then people know when to expect it, and they're queued up and ready and waiting for it. And the other way that you can help yourself keep going this is to not be afraid to recycle content, or if not recycle, repurpose. So a bit like I talked about earlier on, you can, in the same way as you can, for example, create a YouTube video based on a blog that you've already written, you can do that the other way around as well. So if you've, if you're more of a video person than a writing person, and you've created 2 or 3 YouTube videos, well, you could make a blog post out of that YouTube video. And that can be as simple as embedding that YouTube video into a blog post on your website, and either writing a summary of it below, or even, writing a complete transcript of what you've talked about in the video. And if you don't fancy transcribing it yourself, because frankly, that's not very exciting, then there are services like rev.com that will do that for next to nothing. It's like, it costs something like £1 a minute or something to have a video transcribed. Or, even if you've written a blog already, maybe a year or so ago, you could do an updated version of it. Or, if you've written an article about something, you could turn that into a list of tips about that same thing. So there's all sorts of ways like that you can repurpose your content. Maybe, ideal would be, even if you've written a big piece like a book or something, take individual snippets from that and use those as blogs. But if you think about it, there's all sorts of different ways that you can get maximum value out of your content by using the same content more than once, but in different forms or with a slightly different spin on it or whatever. So I hope that's given you a few good ideas. I hope it's shown you the benefits of blogging and made you see that actually doesn't have to be a huge mammoth task, and it's actually something that that anyone can approach if they just know the kind of process to go through. If you want to know more about using a blog, and in particular using a blog to generate leads for a financial services business, I have written, funnily enough, a blog about that. So the address is there on the screen. Have a read of that. It talks about the kind of thing I've covered today, and it's got some more ideas of different things that you can include in your blog post. So let's just see if we have got any questions come in. Don't seem to have any questions, but we've got a couple of people there saying that they have blogs or are just new to doing one. So yeah, I would say it's definitely worth it. I'll be interested. David saying he's got one on the website. I'd be interested to know how up to date it is on when you last blogged. So I would say if you don't have one at the moment, get one set up. But do that planning first. Think about, if you sit down for a couple of hours and brainstorm ideas, you'll come up easily with a year's worth of content that you could blog about, I'm sure. And if you're someone like David who's already got a blog on the site, well, maybe if it has gone dormant, and I don't know if yours has, David, but if it has gone a bit dormant, then let's make this the year to reinvigorate it. Particularly at the moment, when all of the UK is locked down and there's not that much else to do, you might as well use the time constructively. David's just asked a question. You can't copy and paste content you find, right? No. If you shouldn't go copying and pasting stuff, because basically, you'll run into all sorts of two things. You'll run into copyright issues, but also Google won't like it either, because they'll see it as duplicate content and they don't like that. So by all means, use stuff that you see on the blogs as inspiration. Maybe think, oh, that person's written an article about, David said he wrote one yesterday about credit checks. So, clearly there'll be other people who've written blogs about credit checks, and you might see someone else's blog and think, oh, that's a good idea, but I reckon I could write a better blog about that. Then do that. If you do find things in other people's blogs you want to quote, then that's fine. So like that statistic that I put on the screen earlier on about websites have blogs getting more organic search traffic or whatever it was, that is obviously from someone else's website, and it's mentioned in my blog article that I've linked to there on the screen. So in that article, I put that quote, but I then also include a link through to the website where I got it from. So that kind of thing's all right. Same as it's okay to quote from a book, when you're writing an essay at university or whatever, but you can't just copy and paste whole sections and not attribute it. Okay, excellent. Well, if there's no other questions, I will leave it there. If you're watching this on the replay and you have questions, then feel free to put them in the comments, because I will be keeping an eye on this post over the next few days. And if I see any other questions there, I will jump in and answer them. Thank you very much for joining us today, and see you again in a couple of weeks for the next one. Thanks very much.